Madeline, why is a rent strike so important moving forward?
Yeah, so you pointed out a couple really key things, right? Is what the temporary measures that have been taken are really just delaying the problem.
Very myopic.
Very myopic, very much protecting the big banks, the mortgage holders, not or the mortgage lenders, not the holders of that, and are all designed for yet another consolidation of wealth with small-time homeowners and landlords having to lose out on their mortgages, and the banks retaking these homes once again, like what happened in 2008.
Absolutely.
And so this is, seems like a very strategic consolidation of wealth when you think about it from that point of view, in terms of the very small levels of relief that have been given so far. The reason why we need to strike now, and we've been working with the LA Tenants Union to get out the word about people's rights, is if you still have some savings right now, you can send a letter to your landlord saying, hey, I have lost income. I am not able to pay my rent. And they cannot begin any legal eviction procedures on you until 90 days after the crisis is declared over.
Yep.
Again, when we think about why Newsom is talking about, lifting the crisis or going back to normal, all of these things have to do with some of these temporary protections that we've been given and putting an end date to the crisis. There's a lot of folks who are so worried about the budget that, they're wanting to make sure that these protections are lifted as soon as possible. Anyhow, we have to get the word out to folks about their rights in terms of, actually, if you have savings, now's the time to not pay your rent, so that once the extra protections triggered by the coronavirus and the emergency status end, you actually still have your savings to start paying your rent then, rather than putting out all of your savings right now, going without food, when you need to actually be saving that for whenever our fiscal protections end. And the other thing about a rent strike is, if renters strike, then homeowners who have more power in our democracy, they can push for protections for themselves, right? So you have to start at the bottom, at the levels of the renters, to really put pressure on the system and actually get meaningful relief. So a rent moratorium, a mortgage moratorium, where these aren't payments that have to be made.
True moratorium.
A true moratorium.
A true moratorium.
No, guess what? No wages, no rent.
There you go.
If you're not making money, how are you going to pay your rent?
Yes.
And how come every time we have an economic collapse, the entire weight of that has to be borne by the renters, the everyday working people, while the banks and businesses are protected through our oligarchic so-called democracy? So, it's really about creating that solidarity between individuals to say, hey, we have limited rights. We need to push for more rights. And the way we do that is through rent striking and through solidarity actions that put pressure on our electeds to act and to know the weight of the emergency that we're in, and to not delay that reaction, right? We're going to have less leverage if we delay that reaction to July.
Now's the time.
We also have to keep building towards those greater and greater movement building in terms of, getting more and more folks to strike from rent. So
now's the time. I mean, I say if there's ever been a time, and I want to talk about a certain politician who out there who was leading a general strike, rent strike, and debt strike, because now's the time. It's DSA. It's in your wheelhouse, Angel. Let's seize the means of production, renegotiate our debt, renegotiate our working conditions, renegotiate everything. Shut this mother effer down. But, Angel, I think that a lot of people who are on a rent strike really can't afford to pay that rent, right? And they have very limited money. They don't want to give it up. Isn't it going to take people who can afford to pay rent to join this movement to really make it work?
Well, I mean, any kind of collective action obviously is going to be stronger than the stronger, the more people join in. I think one of the advantages of the rent strike, though, is that you're right. A lot of people who aren't paying rent aren't necessarily not paying rent because they choose not to, but because they can't. Yes. But the rent strike is a mechanism to politicize that condition of the being somebody who cannot afford rent is in and of itself a political condition. It is a state of being that requires that acknowledgement of political conditions as well as economic conditions. So the rent strike is a good way to radicalize people in that situation, as well as, you're right, to call out to other people who might not similarly be affected, but to participate in solidarity with people. And one of the things that I find is especially important about tenants organizing in the current movement and in the context of like the broader history of building a left-wing and anti-capitalist left-wing movement in the United States is because, and especially since the 80s, since Reagan, is that, you know, for you talk about, you know, left-wing anti-capitalist movements in say other countries or other points in history, and a lot of the big you know, leaders of those were like labor unions, you know, like the Industrial Workers of the World, AFL-CIO, you know, the Teamsters. Like, the problem is now we have an incredibly weakened labor movement, and also we have a situation of a lot of unemployment. So it's hard to form solidarity through the labor movement right now when not even everybody has a job, let alone a union. But everyone everyone lives somewhere. Everybody, you know, even if where they live is on the street or corner or something, the condition of shelter, condition of, you know, living somewhere is universal and is a much more fundamental way to a fundamental common ground to organize solidarity, to organize people around, you know, because it's like, you know, in my apartment
for one
building,
second, Angel,
yeah.
I just want to stop you right there. But I know what you're saying when it comes to labor, that it's going to be hard to rally around and you know, a type of protest when nobody's at work. But before we go back to work, wouldn't we as workers have the most leverage then? So we can find a way for somebody to tap into them. Hey, we're not returning. We're not going to reopen this economy until you give us what we want. So I understand, you know, you know, and go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to point out that I think you would agree with me that if we did it before we reopened the economy, we have the best position then to get more of what we deserve and what we want. Go ahead.
Pasta, you offered a very appropriate and salient guidance.
Thank you.
Yes, there absolutely should be you know, my dream is that the labor movement and the tenants' rights movement are able to form points of coalescence and mutual support, in that we can have both housing-based collective action and labor-based collective action as sort of mutually supporting modes of resistance. Like say you have, you know, a labor union going on strike, and then if somebody in an apartment, you know, is part of that union, he or she can get all of his neighbors to come out to the picket line for that employer. And then vice versa. If a member of a labor union is on rent strike with their landlord, then you get the whole workers union coming to support that particular person, picket their landlord. And so I think, you know, as return to quote normal unquote, we should be fighting that war on two fronts, both in terms of like you raised the three-pronged, you know, dense labor strategy talk yesterday, and so absolutely, you know, should be refusing to go back to work if they feel, you know, if the conditions aren't safe, you know, and tenants should, you know, refusing and withholding rent, and students should continue to withhold student loan debt. I mean, I know that we've already got sort of a federal deferment on student loan debt, actual like deferment on student loan debt through September, I think. But like, that's definitely one way to you know, to organize resistance, even going past September. I mean, you know, we have so many now, like I said before, since we have this opportunity to seize upon people's more personalized understanding of class differences, we need to then channel that awareness through which those class differences manifest. whether
Yeah.
it be in the school, in the home, in the workplace. And, you know, also like I think we should acknowledge that there's been a lot of great, we had really fortuitous timing that this quarantine really started to build up, you know, right before May Day, you know, International Workers' Day. And so that is a good way to sort of invoke, you know, the struggle of the worker and the tenant in the same time, in the same place. And so there have been also a lot of like, you know, labor strikes popping up around May Day now. Like I know Target, Whole Foods, Instacart have been doing like a coordinated strike that began on May Day. Yeah, we have to be vigilant and continue to support those actions as people try to prematurely lift the restrictions as well.
Yeah.
Can I do a plug?
You can do a plug, please do.
So, you know, all of this talk about organizing for power and tenants can be really big and philosophical and heady. But one way the audience can really plug into this work is to go to www.foodnotrent.org and check out the work that the LA Tenants Union is doing, the resources they have available, and so that you can actively participate in joining the movement or educating those around you who might need the support. Here at the Dandelion House, we're going out and actually canvassing folks at grocery stores. We're putting up signs where folks can get more information. And a lot of these resources are available very simply. LA Tenants Union has an amazing structure in which allows for a lot of lateral action. So all of those resources, and to get involved, you can go to www.foodnotrent.org. So please do that.
Yeah.
We're going to transition.
And there's coordinated efforts. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there are coordinated efforts being held by tenants unions elsewhere in LA County that don't fall directly under Law 2's jurisdiction. Like I know there's there's the Glendale Tenants Union. If you live there, there's the Pasadena Tenants Union that I'm aware of. And if there's any viewers to this stream who are outside, you know, Los Angeles or even California and want to know how to get engaged, there's larger organizations that called Tenants Together, which I think that might just be California statewide. That is Chicago based and sort of helps organize like tenants rights movements nationwide. Is called the Autonomous Tenants Union Network, or ATUN, ATUN. So just search Autonomous Tenants Union Network, and that'll help you plug that. They'll, you know, reach out to them and they can probably help you direct you to something local going on in your area.